of the Public Accounts Committee at Stormont. Delighted this afternoon to have with us the Auditor General, Mr Allen and Mr Bingham from the Northern Ireland Audit Office. And today we're going to hear evidence from the Head of the Civil Service, Dr Jane Brady, and Jill Min, the Head of Human Resources in the Northern Ireland Civil Service. Just remind you, members, that mobile phones must be set to airplane mode or turned off. It's not sufficient to put mobiles on silent mode as they continue to interfere with the Assembly recording. The session is being recorded in video and audio and can be accessed live via online streaming on the Assembly website or Democracy Live. So agenda item 1 is apologies and any delegation of votes. We don't have any apologies this afternoon as far as I'm aware. Okay, and so we will remain in closed session to hear evidence from the Head of the Civil Service. And at this stage, can I ask if Ms Brady and Ms Min were brought into the room, and David Hughes and Brett Hannon join us by Starleaf. Mr Hughes, Mr Hannon, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Mr Hughes, can you hear me? Mr Hughes, can you hear me? Mr Hughes, can you hear me? There seems to be a problem with the link there.
He's just acknowledged.
I can hear you.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so agenda item 2 then is the Head of the Civil Service, Jane Brady. So we're delighted to be joined by Jane Brady, the Head of the Civil Service, Jill Min from the Department of Finance, David Hughes, Department of Finance, and Brett Hannon from the Strategic Investment Board. Members, in your pack of the relevant papers, the memo dated the 3rd of March 2022 suggested line of questioning. The answer dated the 9th of December 2021, pages 10 to 28 of your pack, and witness biographies at pages 29 to 32 of your pack. Okay, so good afternoon, ladies. Welcome to this afternoon's special meeting of the Public Accounts Committee. And I would ask Dr Brady if you would make an opening statement, and then members will field some questions to you.
Thank you so much, Chair. Delighted to be back. And thank you for the opportunity to return to the committee on this important topic. And in addition to the SIB Chair, Brett Hannon, who's joining us, I'm also joined by David Hughes and Jill Min, and they're primarily here for their subject matter expertise. However, their experience is timely for another reason, because their career paths are good examples of what we and I am trying to achieve in leadership for change. The last time I met with this committee was on the 9th of December. That was in my first 100 days. And on the 10th, I was due to visit the Boys Model School, which we had talked about and which I was really looking forward to, a school in an area where I'm very familiar with, and I know, Chair, you're also familiar with. Unfortunately, I had to cancel that visit to attend the UK government meeting on the newly emerging Omicron variant, which was announced in a COPA meeting.
Hardly an excuse.
And I did reschedule it, but something else came up then too. And in that period, we were reaching another period of uncertainty, and you'll recall back to that time, which again was 100 days ago, and we weren't clear of the implications of what that may in turn have for Northern Ireland and also obviously globally. So we made the commitment to learn from where we had been before and to act with agility. So we acted quickly to establish an Omicron surge team, where departments provided resources to be deployed across the system. We knew that teams had been depleted by Omicron over the period, and we knew that if this became as bad as had been forecast, that teams could no longer provide the services that we needed for our ministers, but indeed for the wider population. And in that regard, David Hughes has just returned from a short spell on loan from Department of Finance to the Department of Health, where he bolstered the effort on legislation to manage the coronavirus pandemic. And I am indebted, and we are indebted through the service to him for that. And it's the sort of flexibility and working across boundaries and whole of government approach that we need to see more of if we are to tackle the key challenges under the next Assembly mandate. And Chair, when I was last with you in December at my first 100 days, and that was now 100 days ago, I outlined my vision for the renewal of the Northern Ireland Civil Service under 4 themes: innovation, people, communication and delivery. And I really want to reiterate the value that I put in this process and attendance in front of this committee, and the need to be held account and scrutinised. And I look forward at your indulgence to my next chance to give evidence, perhaps in the next 100 days as well. But with your approval, I'd like to give you some brief highlights on progress under those themes since my last attendance, and after which we'll be happy, of course, to take members' questions. So beginning with innovation, I'm pleased to say that work is well advanced on appointing a Chief Scientific and Technology Officer for the Northern Ireland Civil Service, and indeed the Executive, I guess, reflecting some of the key recommendations that came out of the RHI and the PAC reports in terms of building that expertise, but building it at a whole-of-government approach and at a senior level. And this would play a key role in shaping Northern Ireland's response to challenges such as recovering from the impact of COVID-19 and of competing in a rapidly changing global economic environment driven by transformative technologies. A key aspect of facing these challenges will be increasing our focus on science, technology and innovation. And at the national level, UK Government is developing a range of very high-value investments in science, technology and innovation, which at present NI is not best placed to benefit from at a whole-of-government approach. A cornerstone of any recovery and growth plan will be to maximise Northern Ireland's participation in UK investments and other all-Ireland and indeed global innovation-led investment opportunities. So the role of the new post holder will be to get Northern Ireland to the head of the field. The next theme is people. And in relation to this strand, strengthening senior leadership has been a priority for me since taking up post and is a key theme of my remarks today. And I am pleased to say that a number of key steps have taken place. As head of the service, I particularly wanted to focus on the key organisation development elements of the renewal programme and the commitments made in response to the Northern Ireland Audit Office and PAC reports. In parallel and of equal importance is the need to significantly improve our service delivery within HR, especially in the areas of resource planning, recruitment, vacancy management and employee relations. And this is not a criticism or reflection of what we have been doing, but a recognition of the extent of the challenges we have faced and the level of change required, born out of a need for system-wide changes if we are to deliver against the next renewal agenda. Despite the challenges we have faced in terms of resources, impact of the pandemic, increasing service demand from departments, we have managed to successfully deliver important service improvements through implementation of the People Strategy. However, there is no doubt that we continue to struggle to achieve all that we know is required given the constant and increasing demands of our business as usual work. As a first step in redressing this balance, and to prepare us for taking forward the outputs from the various reviews, an additional senior civil service resource will be put in place to allow for concerted effort on each element. Firstly, the organisation development elements of the Civil Service Renewal Programme, and secondly, the Northern Ireland Civil Service HR service delivery and improvement, splitting those two functions. The responsibilities of each of the roles and their functions, activities, projects and resources will be worked out over the coming weeks, and we will of course engage with staff and with trade unions. And that programme, with TEO working closely hand in glove with DOF colleagues, will focus on ensuring that the Northern Ireland Civil Service has the capacity and the capability that it needs going forward, and it is a key element of our response to the committee's recommendations. And Jill and I would be happy, of course, to say more on that later. Furthermore, the Northern Ireland Civil Service Board has been reconstituted with revised terms of reference. These provide a clearer focus on strategic leadership, managing the Northern Ireland Civil Service to ensure that it has the capacity and capability to support the Executive in developing and delivering its policies. As I mentioned earlier, a key theme for the board will be ensuring that the civil service can work flexibly and with agility across departmental boundaries. The challenges that we face and the policies that the Executive is likely to set are unlikely to fit neatly into individual departments, and we need a whole-of-government approach. Therefore, the board must have the ability to coordinate and deploy our resources to meet those challenges. The membership of the board is also undergoing some significant changes, possibly the most since it's been established. Members will be aware, I am sure, of new permanent secretary appointments, a recruitment process which was designed to ensure support for a diversity of applications, and I am pleased to say that Neil Gibson, currently EY Chief Economist for Ireland, and Colin Boyle will take up substantive posts in Department of Finance and Department for Communities, respectively. In addition to that, a further Perm Sec appointment has been made, which we will announce in due course, and I'm also planning a significant reshuffle of permanent secretaries within the departments as we prepare for the new mandate. I'm also taking steps to bring 2 non-executive members to participate in the Northern Ireland Civil Service Board, and I'm looking nationally and internationally for very high calibre individuals who will bring expertise in the 4 themes that I have mentioned and a constructive external challenge to the Civil Service Board. And I am aware that this is a very significant quantum of change and not something that I'm doing lightly. And of course, change of that magnitude brings its own challenge, but I am confident that it will refresh and reinvigorate my senior team in time for the new Assembly mandate. And we also need to ensure we bring new and refreshed thinking at all levels within the civil service, and our resourcing mix is being expanded through the development of a graduate development programme, which will launch in August of this year. And I've also enjoyed engaging with our student placement cohort in the last number of months, and I'm delighted that an expanded scheme will be launched later this month, taking in 160 students. We're also assessing how we can scale our apprenticeship scheme beyond the procurement and operational delivery announced at the end of last year. The next theme is in terms of communications and engagement. And keeping in theme with my role with senior leadership, I'm pleased to say that we will shortly be commencing a recruitment exercise for a wholly new senior role for the Northern Ireland Civil Service to lead marketing, outreach and internal communications. The post holder will be responsible for improving communications and engagement with existing staff and attracting a wide range of diverse applicants to the Northern Ireland Civil Service. The role will be a key part of our work to deliver the civil service renewal by strengthening communication with our staff and supporting the development of our workforce. In parallel, we are commissioning both a cultural insights analysis and a communications audit to help us to identify what we need to say and how we need to say it. Chair, I would emphasise that good internal communication is not merely a nice to have. Rather, it is a key success factor in organisational effectiveness and delivery and ensuring the Northern Ireland Civil Service is perceived as the best employer of choice in Northern Ireland. Worldwide research in both the public and private sectors show that communication is the key to employee engagement, the measure of how people feel connected to an organisation's key objectives and feel part of its success. In turn, research shows that the best performing organisations in any sector tend to be those with the highest level of employee engagement. So measuring employee engagement is in effect measuring how well we are likely to perform. And I am pleased to say that the overall Northern Ireland Civil Service Employee Engagement Index score for 2021 was 57%, a significant increase of 6 percentage points since the last substantial review in 2019. And the new director will seek to build on that success and further and improve our performance. And finally, in terms of delivery, I'm pleased to say that in December, the Executive approved the publication of the draft investment strategy for Northern Ireland, and I have some copies here to share with you today, which is open for consultation until the 2nd of April. Its production followed engagement with some 100 different groups from the public, private and third sectors, and you'll hopefully have noticed the considerable focus on communications and engagement through the consultation process. The draft investment strategy contains proposals to establish new governance arrangements for capital projects. The Northern Ireland Civil Service Board will sit as the Investment Strategy Programme Board to oversee delivery and will ensure the effective prioritisation, coordination, resourcing and sequencing of major projects. The investment strategy also includes proposals for a cross-departmental, medium-term executive infrastructure plan with an associated financial plan. It also mandates the introduction of a new online portfolio management system that will ensure complete, accurate and up-to-date information on the status of projects is available to officials, the Northern Ireland Civil Service Board and to ministers. And Chair, I want to assure the committee that I am taking a very personal interest in this key strategic programme, and that the Northern Ireland Civil Service stands ready to work with the incoming executive to develop its policies for the new mandate and to lead, develop and deploy our resources to ensure delivery. And thank you, Chair, for your patience. And these are just a few of the brief highlights in what has been a very busy period for the Northern Ireland Civil Service. I've deliberately focused on the themes of senior leadership, and I could sum up the position with a maxim: there is much done, but I know there is still very much to do. Brett, Jill, David and I would be really happy to add light and shade to those issues or any other questions the committee would like to discuss. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms Hunter?
Yes, I'd like to thank you both for being here today and for such a comprehensive overview there of everything that you're working on. I have a number of questions. One which I'm really keen to hear more about is I run the dual diagnosis all-party group, looking at addiction needs and complex needs in our communities and how addiction impacts us. And we as a committee have done a report on this. We know it's a huge issue that impacts each and every one of our constituencies. I'm just curious what your thoughts are on this and what action you feel will be taken at the centre of government to address these issues that impact people's lives.
Thank you so much, Ms Hunter, and I agree that it is a whole of government approach. I think I shared the last time I was in the committee, but on my third day, and I still remember my days. So my third day in office, I visited Maghaberry prison, and I was really struck there. I was struck on two things actually about. I guess
that was just a day visit, was it?
That was just a day. Let me out. But actually, the gap there was between educational deprivation and ending up in these areas. There was 71% and left school at 16 years of age, and many couldn't still read or write. But actually, the addiction issue was prevalent. I think over 90% had alcohol or drugs addictions. And we talk about the next board and it being constituted, but what's it all about? The next board is how collectively we can get together to solve the problems we can't solve in a single department. And for me, when everything else fails, it ends up in the justice system and it ends up in health departments, and actually it needs to be a whole systems approach. So we are looking and at a number of key strategic themes across the areas, and I think I maybe touched in these areas, but how we have framework for programme for government and we have a COVID recovery, but actually what are the big cross-cutting themes that will deliver a really step change impact in the next 10 years? And certainly in those health outcomes pieces, the importance of early interventions is really critical and key. So we are, and Dennis in my department is looking towards what are those big threads that we could actually say as a service could be our strategic delivery priorities, and building those early interventions into those aspects as well. So I guess I'm very keen to see those type of things you cannot solve in health or in justice. They have to be solved in education and then communities and also other aspects. I'm also very minded and we have been looking at what the potential scarring implications will be of the pandemic, and we are almost now at a 2-year anniversary, but actually we will not be back into the same position that we were previously, and our economic inactivity has increased by a couple of percentage points, and there are groups which are inversely impacted. We're up in 25 to 27%. Young people, under 25s, women, people with disabilities are inversely impacted, but also a vast proportion of those, more than 50%, come from a background who have got now mental health issues, again, which ties into potentially threads in terms of addiction issues. So I don't have the solutions yet, but it is a key theme that we have. We need to look towards the whole system issue and tackling, in my view, those early interventions. We talked about the investment strategy, and this looks towards the infrastructure investment strategy, but what we're looking more holistically is actually what are the big programmes that we can marshal behind as a Northern Ireland Civil Service Board, that we can say, go outside, a 5-year electoral mandate, but actually because you can't solve them in 5 years, you need to have longer term objectives. So that is one of the early years of tackling those that we are looking at supporting.
I was just going to say, could I maybe say something as well about the role of the civil service as an employer?
Yeah.
because obviously, we're one of the largest employers, if not the largest employer here, and I think there's a responsibility as well for us to look at, in addition to our graduate schemes and opening up our recruitment, that there is for us to design interventions in terms of those furthest removed from the labour market.
Yeah.
So that's why we're looking at not only apprenticeship schemes, but also then actual employability programmes that are designed to get people pathways into employment, because obviously one of the biggest routes out of addiction or poverty or any of those things is to get employment and to keep that employment. And then obviously the civil service itself is a microcosm of society, so it's important that we have our own policies and procedures in place, which we do, but we are also, in addition to those, we are developing a mental health strategy, and that will obviously have those aspects in it as well to help our own staff. But that again demonstrates, when we are trying to open up the civil service to attract people, that there are good policies and procedures in place and that we are an employer of choice.
Great, thank you both, and you covered all the aspects there with early intervention and the importance of it. It's some really welcomed comments there also from yourself, and I'm 26, and I noticed that you've highlighted there the lack of under 30s being represented within the civil service. Can I ask just two questions around that? Do you know why that is? And I know you touched on there, which is really positive as well, looking at the schemes that you have. Will that include like a graduate training programme and apprenticeships as well? Any further clarity on that would be great, because I think young people really bring that energy as well to any kind of job that they have. So.
And absolutely, and Jill can come in detail, but that's a critical focus in terms of the diversity of skills, but actually that we need to represent the people we serve. So we have a graduate programme that is being delivered this year, and Jill can give further details of that. But also the placement students, and I had sessions with our placement students, and they're just so full of energy. It was the first time we ran it, and we're scaling, I think, to 160, and those are in specific disciplines, so they're in law and accountancy, and they're bringing in that professionality piece, but they're also bringing in fresh thinking. And I guess what we also, and we have started to do this, is telling the story of those brilliant young people who are coming in. So there'll be some, maybe saw on social media some video clips of those as we actually market ourselves more broadly towards those sectors. I guess the position in terms of why our age profile range is that we have very little leavers from the service. But maybe we can get some more flavour in terms of...
Well, I mean, it is a bit like turning an oil tanker, but, we have to open it up, and we are opening up, and that is one of the biggest themes, really, that we're focusing on in terms of talent management. But ultimately, until recently, we had a policy, well, we still have a policy position of internal promotion boards, but that policy has been reviewed. So obviously, if you're just promoting from within, it is extremely hard to change the balance.
Yeah.
And if the routes into the civil service aren't there, like apprentices, graduate schemes, etc., but those are now in place. We have trebled our student placements, so year on year that gets bigger and bigger. One of our issues as well is that our turnover rate is very low. So some organisations are actually struggling very much with a high turnover rate, and as in terms of COVID, people have talked about the Great Resignation, but our turnover rate has actually got lower, so our turnover rate is only 2.8%. So you have to weigh you have to basically have a policy position of external recruitment, but that is basically an ongoing issue with the consultation with the trade unions, and then various routes in. And then, as Jane said, you actually have to market the civil service as people want to come and work for us. I mean, we need to go up against the Big Four and all other organisations and market ourselves as a great employer to young people, and show through video clips and all sorts of social media that somebody as old as me hasn't a clue about, but somebody else will, and that expertise in terms of marketing it to young people as actually the huge variety of jobs that we have and the great opportunities that we have. So it's a whole talent management approach, really.
Fantastic. Chair, can I ask one more? Thank you very much, and that offers a lot of clarity, and definitely a lot of my friends are interested in the scheme, so I'll have to spread the word. But
Tell them to get onto the website.
it's fantastic it's being addressed. I think that's what's so important here, and then marketing and social media is such a huge part of that, and it makes people feel part of something as well, or that they want to be part of it. Just my last question there, I know we had talked a lot, you had talked a lot in your briefing there about creativity and innovation, and you touched on a technology officer being appointed. Can you detail how this will assist in the COVID recovery, and also what you're doing to ensure that culture of creativity and innovation continues moving forward?
Yes, and I guess I make no excuses as coming as a former Innovation Commissioner of putting innovation in the centre. So you'll be aware, I'm very sure that no one hasn't come across our Chief Scientific Advisor in Department of Health, Ian Young, and obviously we have a Chief Scientific Advisor in Department for Agriculture, but actually we have none at the executive level, but yet our strategies, the investment strategy for Northern Ireland, is clearly innovation based. It's about green growth trajectory, about digital transformation, but yet we have none of those expert references at that level. And I guess my observation is often we consult that big innovation thinking out to the big four, and actually we need to bring that internally. All other DAs have a Chief Scientific and Technology Officer at that level, so we're actually missing not being engaged at that level. So for this is a very strong reference point in terms of engaging North, South, East and West with those pieces, but also embedding that innovation guidance. And this will not be working, at a level that is for first and deputy. This is for the executive and the next board, so they will be in a governance model which can give independent advice to specific ministers in terms of that approach. But that's fundamental at that level, and we're working with Patrick Valance's office to support us with recruitment of that as well. But of course you need then to embed that more fully into our systems, and looking towards those threads we talked about, those big innovation themes which are covered in the 5 themes in our investment strategy. They're long-term, they're 10-year type trajectories, but actually then we need to look towards how we can fund them. So working with the UK government in terms of their levelling up and innovation agenda through the bays and significant sums of money that are provided in that, but also the Shared Island Fund, so those things to fund that kind of big strategic propositions, as well as also then working with our business sectors as well in terms of engaging the innovation piece. Also, it's really important we don't just do it at the top level, so bringing that skills perspective and actually the professional skills which Jill and the team are working on in terms of bringing that in at all different levels within the organisation, and those graduate placements and the areas that we're taking have specific skills as well. And of course then, I guess the innovation piece, and some of it comes with working with we're working with the Cabinet Office Commercial College as well in terms of making sure we're building the skills in for innovation and correct commercial management and protocols, and there has been significant throughput from that organisation. So I guess it's an innovation and an overall learning agenda, and part of what Jill's role will be in that newly segmented role is working with me at the senior civil service to see how we do that organisation and development and bring in the new skills, plus allowing us to actually reskill our current workforce as well.
Great, that's it for me. Thank you both for the answers.
But it was interesting, you talked about the Northern Ireland Civil Service Board being reconstituted and the changes that you made there. Could you expand on that, please?
Yes, we have agreed a revised terms of reference, which actually covers those 4 themes that we had developed in terms of delivery. I guess it's overall about the delivery, so what do we need to actually then have in terms of capability and capacity to make those big delivery milestones. It's about communications. How do we communicate with our stakeholders, both internally, externally? It's about meeting innovation at the core of what we do, in addition to looking towards how we build the actual personal skill set. So we have drafted terms of reference which have been signed off by the next board itself. We are now in the process for this refreshed next board, so we will from the 1st of April have a change of complement of permanent sex around that table, and some will be in different roles as we have gone through a reshuffle perspective.
So can you, for this committee and any of the general public who are taxpayers watching, what does the new newly constituted Civil Service Board look like, and how's it populated?
It has, in the newly populated board, will have all the permanent sec roles. There will also be OLC representation. There will be DSO, Department of our Solicitor's Office representation. We will have our organisation and development capability, and we will have 2 external non-execs appointed to that Northern Ireland Civil Service Board.
So outside of these two new external non-execs, is this the same board but just different faces because you're doing a reshuffle? Have you changed it in terms of going out and bringing people in for specific reasons? I mean, is it the permanent secretaries and yourself?
Well, we also have then external appointees, which will be, in fact, it was part of the guidance from this PAC committee in terms of bringing those in. So that will be an entirely new perspective. What we are doing also is actually developing a corporate programme of activities. So in the investment strategy for Northern Ireland, it identifies that we will be reviewing we will be the programme board for the investment strategy. So we also will be reviewing that on a twice yearly basis. So it will have a different mandate. We're looking towards how we build in formal processes in terms of those corporate objectives. So we're reconstituting the schedule for meetings. So at the moment it meets once a month. We will be moving that into a more corporate agenda of meeting around at the start and end of each quarter to manage what we are doing before and following that perspective. But of course, as you might imagine, permanent secs will also be attendance at that board, but we will have the external scrutiny and governance of external directors and a new programme of work that we will do.
So these new external directors, that's 2 people, yeah?
Yes.
Have you begun the process of recruiting these people?
We have started, we've got the role definition for those, and we're looking towards our appointment process. We are, and I've begun some discussions with different areas and groups, very keen that we bring in a commercial skill set in terms of lining up with the investment strategy as well as looking to the more broader perspective. We intend to set up the new board in terms of once we have that new permanent secs in place as well, so that we are starting afresh with a new perspective.
How are these people going to be recruited? I mean, are you going to put an advertisement out? Are you going to headhunt them? How are they going to be recruited?
So we're working with the SIB in terms of the recruitment process. So we've drafted specifications for the non-exec role. They will not have a necessarily fiduciary responsibility within the Northern Ireland Civil Service Board, as it doesn't have an accounting officer representation within the Civil Service Board. So we're working with the SIB through that process in terms of drafting the spec and how we can appoint that. So we're expecting to be in place with that in the April timeframe. Northern Ireland Civil Service Board members at the permanent sec level refreshed. We also have we're working with some just facilitation session as we bring together that newly constituted board to make sure that we're clear in terms of those draft objectives and that we don't kind of stumble into just doing the same as we've done before. So we're providing some facilitation around bringing those new board members and where some of them will be external appointments into that Northern Ireland.
And do you have a time scale as to when you wish to have these people in place?
Yes, we do. So we have commissioned the work for the facilitation session, and they are to start in the end of March, and that procurement activity has been successful. And our intent is to have that process run and in place for the start of the new mandate in timeframe.
You'll be aware that this committee, in terms of the report on capacity and capability in the civil service, took the view that the new head of the civil service should have the powers of the head of the Scottish civil service. Sadly, that was a recommendation that was not taken up. You're a considerable number of days in job now and post now, more than you were when you came just before Christmas. Do you think if that recommendation had been taken up, we would be in a stronger, and you would be in a better and stronger position as head of the civil service? Or do you think, are you content with the progress being made?
I mean, I know there is models, of course, where accounting officer does reside with the head of the civil service, but also that would require legislative changes within how we run our constitution. So I came into the role very clear with what my hard levers were, what my soft levers were, as part of that, and actually how I can move within that machinery to make impact. I think there are obviously pros when you have that overall accounting officer responsibility, but I recognise we are a five-party coalition and ministers have ultimate policy responsibilities for their areas, and Permanent Secs have accounting officer responsibilities, and FM and DFM have at the executive level. But that doesn't mean that we cannot make substantive programme in a different framework and a different way forward. I am appointing Permanent Secs into roles. I am looking towards the constitution of that civil service board. I am looking to bring in those non-execs to provide that external scrutiny, and I have the support of the First Minister and Deputy First Minister when they were in post who signed off on this approach going forward.
So can I just interject there? They're now not in post. And one of the reasons we made the recommendation about the head of the civil service having the powers of Scotland was so that we didn't have the situation that was created under Mr. Sterling's time when he came in front of this committee and said he didn't have the power that perhaps we thought he had. What has the impact been of the resignation of the First Minister and the fact that the First Minister and Deputy First Minister are no longer in office? Obviously
disappointing for me losing my First Minister and Deputy First Minister, but I'm there to serve the ministers within the executive and there to serve the people of Northern Ireland and the staff that work for me. So we have actually made substantive progress, and I guess there's a different environment from there in that we do have ministers in post, so things have been able to move, and we have great assembly progress in terms of bills that have progressed in terms of doing that. So, I mean, I do what I can, when I can, and I move things forward as clearly as I can do within the confines that I have. First and Deputy First Minister signed off on the renewal strategy and programme that I've just outlined prior to this, so there's a lot of remit I have in moving forward. We're working, obviously, in that period, obviously we've got the situation with Ukraine, which we're working with at an all-ministerial level, and we're engaging with all the ministers in the executive who are really up for supporting and doing what they can. So I would say I have a very good relationship with my ministerial colleagues and Permanent Secs, and I'm moving things forward for when we do have an executive up and running, and when FM and DFM are in post as well. Okay,
and finally for me for the moment, you mentioned Mr. Gibson and Mr. Boyle, and you said they had substantive posts. Can you tell me what those substantive posts are?
Yeah, Mr. Neil Gibson, who you know, he will be coming in as the Permanent Secretary of the Department of Finance, and again, and it maybe speaks to the point that you made, Ms. Hunter, in that I think that can bring a refreshed look. Obviously, it's diversity of viewpoints, but in terms of running an economy, it isn't just about running an economy, it's actually understanding all the factors that are important in terms of getting the whole of government approach to running an economy. So I know that you may have seen some of the aspects that he's led on in terms of competitive index, how you look at school age reading and those aspects. So I think that will bring a diversity of input into terms of that budgeting process. In addition to, we work significantly with consultancy firms, and obviously it comes from a consultancy, so knowing how to manage that effectively as well. So very delighted that may be in place from the 1st of April. Colin Boyle was on a temporary promotion within the Department of Finance and did a very substantive and great job. He will be moving back into Department for Community, so he was successful in the process. And again,
as a Permanent Secretary? As
a Permanent Secretary. And again, Colin, the Department of Communities is a third of our civil service. It is a critical aspect as we move through the pandemic and that economic inactivity that we run, as well as the machinery of benefits payments. So again, a very good skill set in my view to come in to that role, and I guess that right balance of not new thinking along with kind of very experienced and seasoned perspectives. There are a number of other appointments which we'll be announcing in the next number of days in terms of looking towards that reshuffle. And I talk about the explore, and what are the things are we need to do substantively, and not everything. You know, we need to focus on what those are. But actually, this is a time and place perspective. So we have new people coming in. We have told you about the things we have delivered in terms of bringing new and fresh people in at different levels in the service. But actually, this point of discontinuity that we have post-pandemic, as we move out of that, the period that we have going into a new mandate allows us to actually embrace that step change and put new systems and progress in place. And I guess that's what I'm committed to do. That's why I took the job, and that's what I plan to deliver on during the months and the years ahead.
Okay, thank you. Mr McHugh.
Thank you, Chair.
I got Chair. I guess Chas. I'm going to love Chair Reese. It's nice meeting with you again. Just a question in relation to, again, to capacity and capability. Could you give us some further detail on the schemes that you develop in order to increase diversity?
Yes, something very close to my heart, particularly on Women's Day, so I'm, you know, what I've been really clear about is that actually the diversity isn't just the social justice value piece of diversity, which of course I would be clear about, but actually it's the diversity that brings a different value and better outcomes. So that's not diversity in a gender necessarily, but that's age and that's different economic outlooks and how we bring that diversity around the table. So I have engaged with all our diversity groups through the progress, and it's been great to hear from them and the work that they're marshalling through those areas. And I think of diversity for example, and we talked about people with disabilities being adversely impacted, and we have delivered the guaranteed interview scheme, which Jill can give more information about, and we're delivering the Harkin conference again later on this year in June, a global conference which looks towards the opportunities for scaling in terms of diversity outcomes themselves as well. So we are, and I was at the event last Friday with the women's diversity group in terms of listening to them and learning from them, but also providing them the support that we can within those diversity subsets in the group as well. So maybe Jill, you want to reference, and we just launched today the menopause policy as well, which is great to see those specific things which actually signal that we're open for understanding the diversity and roots from that our people have, but also that citizens have as well. So maybe Jill, you want to reference some of the other?
Yeah, I mean, we've done a considerable amount of work on it, and we actually have a diversity champion around various elements of diversity and inclusion. So we have a gender champion, we have disability champion, we have an ethnic minority, LGBT. So there are various, elements where we have, and then we have staff networks around those areas as well. And then HR, if you like, will assist those networks and assist those groups in terms of any interventions or any policy work that we feel that is helpful. I mean, one of the biggest things for us is around opening up the civil service and really trying to attract people because, to make us representative of where we are. And we're not at the minute. We're underrepresented in terms of disability, and we're underrepresented in terms of young people, as you know, and also in terms of ethnic minority. We are 50-50 overall in terms of male-female, but that gets lower when you go up the senior civil service, so the senior civil service is underrepresented in terms of women. But we have gone from, I think it's around 11% to 42% over the past few years, so we've made real strides there. We have then in place some things that we have launched over the past while, and a lot of that has actually been looking at our diversity and inclusion plan with a COVID lens, if you like, because, and Jane made reference to the fact that certain people are economically scarred by COVID, but obviously internally as well, our own staff have been impacted by COVID. So actually one of the things that we did was look at our domestic abuse policy. So our domestic abuse policy has been reviewed, and we've won an award for that recently, and we're rolling that out Jane mentioned the guaranteed interview scheme, which is very much an intervention which has been really welcomed by disability groups. We launched today on International Women's Day the menopause policy. We're trying to increase the number of disability placements and working very closely with the Employers Forum on Disability. And we'll have the mental health strategy in place hopefully by the end of this month. So it's,
Just also to take in, when I've engaged with diversity groups, we're also conscious that we need to, the transformation needs to be based on evidence-based, so we're doing these things which we know are right things. So our cultural insights was important to find out actually that we need to get, granular evidence. I'm a data person to actually say where actually are we that we need to move forward from and to build that evidence base. That cultural insights is important as well.
And just as you said at the outset about it being close to your heart, and something that won't surprise you, that's very close to my heart as our native language. And given the very reasonable expectation that we all have a Language Act before the end of this particular mandate, but definitely within the next mandate as well too. And what way have you prepared for that within the civil service in terms of appointing and recruiting competent people that can actually meet the demands of the Irish-speaking community here in the north of Ireland, and that they can deal with their queries now as they would come in?
Thank you. And of course, there are aspects of that which are policy-led decisions, and of course, we haven't been given the policy direction, and I appreciate it's in NDNA, but we're working within the kind of confines that we have from a policy perspective. So I don't know whether, Jill, there's any reference in terms of Department of Finance and the policy interventions, but...
sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I know that there has been work ongoing, but it's not my area of things, but I know there has been work ongoing in terms of registration and births, deaths, marriages, etc. I think, but I'm not an expert in that. But more generally, I suppose what we have been doing in terms of HR is looking at each department in terms of any skills gap, and not just sort of existing skills gap, but as Jane says, trying to look horizon scan and looking at the skills that would be needed where there are any gaps. So that work is underway as in terms of a generic piece of work in terms of where are we now in terms of skills, what skills might we need down the line, and how are we best placed to prioritise and fill those gaps.
Well, with all due respect, it sounds as if very little has happened to date in preparation for that. But you are quite right. It is a skills gap that will be there, and that one should be in a position to be able to recruit, and even if you have a recruitment policy at the present time, to ensure that those coming forward might have those particular skills and could reflect that on their qualification, whether it's at GCSE, A-level or graduate level, and that as well too. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Barnett.
Thank you, Chair, and you are very welcome. Jane, just there's something that's been a real bugbear for me, because I've been in a couple of committees now where, especially this time around, we've seen departments with a high capital allocation but hasn't the resource to deliver. So I ask the question in this respect, because we know that and it's before your time, but we know that under the voluntary exit scheme, some areas the department's lost 50% of the workforce in certain areas, but not only that, they lost 50% of their skill set, which is even more. Okay? So in that respect, and I understand where you're coming from in terms of, which is, what have we learned from that exercise, and how can we ensure that going forward, that there's a workforce model there that's going to deliver? That's a key element. And I do feel that we did lose it. I feel that the transfer under RPA to local government, I think we lost out too. So I just want to ask in that context.
No, and I get that's been a theme that's come up in all the reports, and the HR, the operating model and the workforce model is a critical area, and Jill looking at the HR model for the end of this month, and overall at the integrate model for June. In the last 12 months, actually we have increased the workforce by 1.2 thousand, and which is about 5% increase. So actually there has been an activity to increase that. And I think coming into it, it was kind of a reflection of why can't you just get these staff? And it was, and Jill continually gets that. But actually, we need to, talking about skills, we need to have a resource focused on developing those skills as well as providing the kind of system level machine of recruitment. So that, when I talked about earlier about looking towards the people area, is that splitting of that roles within Department of Finance. Jill will be working really closely with me and TEO and Department of Finance, but she will focus on the organisation development, how we build those skills pathways, how we work at the SAS level, as well as having a new post which actually then looks about the volume delivery piece. We will be recruiting into that because actually we believe it's too substantive to be actually able to deal with that. I think the VES perspective, and I guess gets into the level of expertise you have and the level of succession planning. So I do not see. I see big issues in terms of succession planning overall in the civil service, particularly when you have an ageing population and you have people there who are in it maybe for 40 years actually, in that, building that level of expertise. So that's something that we need to focus on, that we are focusing on at that next board. What are the big things that we need to in that senior civil servant? And succession planning will be a really critical part of that, as well as then bringing in the right skill sets and expertise, so bringing in an economist with that background who has those levels, bringing in a scientific technology person as well to allow us to actually have those skills that we will need for delivering the next phase for the civil service as well.
Another point I want to make. We've done a number of reports from you here last, a number of inquiries. Leadership and governance seems to be still an issue across departments. So the question is, in terms of the discussions at the board itself, I mean, is that clearly that has to be high on the agenda, but is there any obstacles, or how do you feel that discussion? How do you address it within the board itself to ensure going forward those issues are addressed?
Yeah, I think the investment strategy outlines the next board is the governance framework for that. We'll go to the next board twice a year. We'll go to the executive in terms of that governance model and kind of the role for that for capital projects. And we will have an investment strategy programme board as well. But I think there's a skills element in terms of governments and commercially managing frameworks, and there was the NEC4 contract which was outlined in terms of managing those processes going forward. So I guess governance is a kind of critical aspect for these big substantive programmes and projects as we move forward. I don't know whether maybe Brett wants to come in terms of some of the governance models that's been looked at as part of the investment strategy, Brett?
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. Good afternoon, everyone. The big change which the investment strategy is proposing, and which, if the executive approves it, will be implemented in the way that Dr. Brady has described, represents a real change in the approach to the delivery of the executive's capital investment programme, because for the first time there will be an overarching governance structure which will ensure that programmes and projects are holistically prioritised, coordinated, sequenced and resourced, and ensure that the level of oversight, well-informed oversight, is appropriate and sufficient to enable the NICS board in its role as the programme board for the investment strategy to exert that control which the committee has always sought to see exercised. And I think if those proposals are endorsed, taken forward and implemented, you will see a step change in the way in which that programme is delivered.
Now a couple of questions, Chair, you don't mind. We passed a bill, now it may not mean a lot to some people in the room, but it certainly, we passed a bill in the Assembly last night, the Autism Amendment Bill. And 10 years ago we brought forward the Autism Act. And I mentioned it in the silo mentality and cross-departmental working, because for a number of years we brought about action plans and strategies and outlined responsibilities of each department as to how that would roll out. We brought the bill last night to try and enhance all of that, to bring it together. So my question to yourself is, how do you stop the silo mentality, and how do you ensure going forward that there is cross-departmental work and that they do take responsibility and they do, because at the end of the day, the bill, and I use it in the context of, you know, I mean, it's something I've been on a committee for a number of years and feel very passionate about it. But how do we deliver for some of the most vulnerable people in society? And that's what the legislation is about, but more so about ending the silo mentality and the cross-departmental working to deliver for the citizens. And how have you gone about tackling that, Jane?
Thank you, Mr. Bullen, and it was great to see that come through, and I guess tying into the diversity agenda as well. And then for me, the next board is a critical aspect of what are our corporate programme of work, and we are also refreshing how we manage delivery for the senior civil service in terms of identifying that corporate programme of activities. You know, so I am a line manager in terms of the civil service population, so how we build into those key priorities so that everyone has obviously departmental objectives, but we will have corporate objectives. And indeed, some of the programmes we talked about there earlier were led by some permanent sex in different departments. So there needs to be an acknowledgement that we are delivering at that next board level in terms of an overall corporate programme. And part of, you know, the looking towards refreshing that board is we will be signing off on those corporate programmes of work as well. Breaking, you know, silos is the hardest thing in the world, and you know,
Jane, is there pockets of resistance still?
I think there's pockets of resistance, yeah, in all, you know, areas. Of course, that you're doing something new, but actually, you know, when I was here the last time, and then Omicron struck the next day, and I said, okay, we need to establish a surge team. I need your volunteers from the service. I didn't mandate anything. Give me your volunteers that we need to move them. And actually that was true cross-departmental working. And David put his hand up, and his Prime Sec was over that. We got groups from DERA, went into that, and actually we delivered cross-departmentally. The COVID task force is an entirely cross-departmental group, which meets. I'm meeting this morning with that group, and they're coming together and I guess that joint endeavour and areas. So have we never done it before? We have done it before. Do we do it enough? No, absolutely not. But there are models that we have in terms of delivering that going forward. And I think, you know, when we talk about can we nail it down into a few strategic threads, and this covers the strategic threads, but you know, the investment strategy for Northern Ireland is entirely cross-departmental. You cannot deliver a green growth strategy for Northern Ireland unless you deliver it cross-departmentally. The green growth strategy, DERA's led, delivers into every single department. So it's not that it will be you know, an optional thing. There are some things that actually cannot be delivered within one department, and I think what we need to do is to build models on those, building on what we did with the COVID task force, but building on models actually where there is, you know, synergistic delivery. Energy is of course entirely referencing this. Department for Economy have leadership of that, but obviously it lines up with the DERA strategy for green growth, which covers all the various aspects. So,
No, appreciate it, because none of us know where we're coming back here, and that I would like to think the bill would pass last night that people would get together, the departments would work together to deliver. That's the most important thing. And my final question, Chair, is this, and Jill, maybe it's over to yourself, because you talked about recruitment and retaining people and retaining staff. At the minute, education welfare officers are out on strike at the minute for pay parity. Now, I appreciate they're across a different department to do a similar type job, social worker job, to those in the health sector, but are paid less. I mean, if we're serious about, if it's a similar type job, I'm not arguing about the grades, or if that needs to be looked at, that's okay, that's a legislative framework. But surely, if people are doing the same job, should be paid the same rate. Have you any views on that?
Well, obviously I completely agree that if people are doing the same jobs, you know, there's an equal pay issue there. I don't have remit for that area at all. So it would be misplaced of me, to be honest, to comment on it. Ours is in terms of the Northern Ireland civil service pay, you know, all the directly employed staff. So, I mean, it's not that I'm trying to dodge the question.
No, you're not. I just thought I'd raise it here at this forum, because, I mean, if we're serious, because you keep saying about retaining staff. And you know, I was glad Cara was able to say she was 26. I was going to say I'm over 20. I get away with it. But all I'm saying to you, for serious about drive and change.
Yeah.
And if you're going to deliver, you know, the likes of those things happening, then it's not right.
And I think it depends on the workforce, you know, just from a sort of an HR professional perspective. It'll depend on what your circumstances are for that particular workforce. So for the Northern Ireland Civil Service workforce, we have a very low turnover. It's, you know, we're not losing a lot of people, but it is, the demographic is such that it's old, and I'm saying that as one myself. Other areas may have a very high attrition rate, so they're going to have to look at pay flexibilities, attracting new people. So it'll depend, I suppose, what the issue is for that workforce.
But surely the two government departments are paying different rates for the same job.
Mr. Borland, I think...
Sorry, I just want to bring it up.
I know, but you've had an answer to the question which cannot be answered, I suppose.
Yes, okay.
So, okay. Mr. Muir.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thanks for coming along. I think the work that's been done since we last met and for the period of time has been commended. It's a difficult programme of work, but I think it's to be commended. I think my questions relate to two areas. One is just in relation to the current situation and also in relation to major capital projects in the memorandum of reply. In the current situation, could I ask you, Jane, who's your line manager at the present moment in time?
Well, of course, it was First Minister and Deputy First Minister when they were in post. So they are no longer in post in that remit.
Yes.
We do have junior ministers
Yeah.
who I also engage with. Of course, they have no mandate to commission any new activity, and we have the former Deputy First Minister who's exercising the functions of governance.
Yeah, because I think the work that you're doing is to be commended, but the elephant in the room at the moment is that lack of that sort of leadership role within political government here in Northern Ireland. And in the investment strategy here, it also outlines, it says, and it was signed by the former First Minister and Deputy First Minister, the strategy describes the outcomes we intend to achieve. It will be implemented through a rolling 10-year investment plan that will define and prioritise the individual programmes and projects we need to deliver, and will be matched to a financial plan that will show how these will be funded. We're currently moving into a situation there is no budget for the next financial year, never mind the 2 years beyond that. What's the real implications of that upon the delivery of all the issues that you're outlining?
Well, I mean, at the moment this is out for consultation, and so we're bringing that forward. We're about to go into the pre-election period. To reassure you, I am engaging with all ministers, and I'm conscious we're going through in this period very significant global aspects. So whilst I'm getting access to that information, I'm engaging with all ministers through the executive to make sure that they're able to provide access to that information but fulfil the duties within their department. The budgeting position has obviously is an aspect for the Department of Finance Minister in terms of producing that settlement. But I am confident once we get back in office that there is an action to bring the investment strategy forward, both for approval and also the programme for government framework and the budget position. So I guess the Minister can ask for his kind of budget position, and we are going through initial budgeting exercises, looking at 45% allocation of the baseline and how we can move forward in that basis. But overall, you know, of course, best from my perspective is working within the executive context, and obviously with I'm hoping that will be in place, you know, as soon as possible after the election period. But in the meantime, I'm moving forward, doing what I can in terms of delivering on these aspects. These would be going forward in any case, so it would have been coming out in April, so it would have been for the new mandate as well to sign off in terms of that. And all the engagements that we are progressing as well will be delivering, obviously within the executive construct. Of course, there are things we can't do, you know, and I'm really clear that we can't sign off on a great budget, and there are aspects that we can't do, but where we can move forward at an official level, we are moving forward. We're at the task force level, we're engaging with COVID and the pandemic and moving those aspects forward. We're looking towards what the position will be for refugees as well, obviously because there's departmental implications, and working forward with our DA colleagues at an official level and across the island of Ireland to do those aspects. So there is much we can do, and I am, and leading with the officials and the permanent sector group to do that. But there are areas, of course, which is only right for executive decisions to be made, which are significant cross-cutting, and also for FM and DFM to deliver on.
Thank you for that. I think the issue is that this is out for consultation, and the reality is it needs an executive to be able to agree it. And without that, and without the First Minister and Deputy First Minister, that won't become an agreed investment strategy. So there's an awful lot of things where the energy and the focus has been put into, I worry, will dissipate very, very quickly in relation to that. And that's the situation in terms of ministers still being in office. There will be an executive if there isn't an ability to reform that. Never real worry you'll be in the situation as your predecessor, which is David Stirling, where you know that an awful lot of things cannot be progressed. And we had a situation here where an awful lot of things, you know, there was desire to be able to create strategies and stuff like that, and that wasn't available. The other question was really in relation to the memorandum of reply for major capital projects. You referred to the investment strategy, if that's agreed, and I've already outlined my serious concerns in relation to this. Would have a chair and authority to be able to drive things forward. From where will that authority be drawn? Who will chair that board? And how will that authority be drawn? Because I'm very conscious that the reply to our first recommendation was sort of drawn upon our constitutional position. But the issue is that major capital projects report wasn't very glowing about the civil service, and it's demonstrated in relation to the inability to spend capital funding. You know, consistently there's a real challenge in being able to spend capital funding. Funding's either returned or it's not spent. Financial transactions capital is not fully utilised. So there's a real need to be able to turn this around, and just interested to know how that investment strategy board will be sort of structured, and is it more soft power you'll be leasing to other permanent secretaries, or how advice will that be driven?
Thank you, and I agree in terms of the work and the programme, and you know, from the financial management. I think the Fiscal Commission, the Fiscal Council has been really helpful in terms of outlining strategic approaches. And of course, we're going to have a new Department of Finance Minister in place, a new Department of Finance in the second place, who may have views and thoughts on that as well as indeed new ministers who could be in place overall. I chair the next board, but we will have the two independent members in terms of providing an external scrutiny, and that will be defined in terms of the job of work and programme, much of which will be ensuring delivery of the PAC and office reports. But it will also go to the executive, so it will go twice yearly to the next board, and that will also go to the executive. We are the next board will also be presented on by CPT in terms of the update from the capital programmes in June of this year as well. So we do have a structure in terms of delivering that also. In terms of the governance aspects, Brett maybe you want to come in, but mentioned some of the new aspects that we are looking to bring into this. So Brett, do you want to maybe reference some of the aspects?
The main change, as I referred to earlier, will be the construction of an executive infrastructure investment plan, which is an overarching plan which goes beyond what we have at the moment, which comprises individual departmental plans. And having that overarching investment plan with executive approval, backed up by a medium-term financial plan which shows where the funding is going to come from and how it will be allocated, provides that governance which you have always sought. And it does mean that when projects require to be resequenced or resources need to be moved, all the people that are required in order to take those decisions are in the room and are debating those decisions, are debating them on the basis of the best possible information, and will be making recommendations to ministers as a group in the executive to take the key political decisions, which are essentially to do with prioritisation. So it puts in place a structure which enables decision making to be made on a timely basis and on a well-informed basis. And I think that represents a real improvement.
Yeah, see in relation to major capital projects, there was projects listed, there were problems in there, and for example the Department of Infrastructure and Department of Health, Department of Communities. My question really is, where are you going to get the authority to be able to turn this around? Because there is a real need as a result of this report from ourselves to be able to be driving good practice within those departments. But if you don't have the authority to do that, essentially this is just going to be a talking shop. That's my concern. And there needs to be able to turn this around. Like the situation in relation to the Royal Victoria Hospital is one example of a major capital project which was over time, over budget. You know, there's many others, Casement Park and stuff like that, which have been fairly discussed here. But if we're just left in the situation at the moment, it's just at the behest of that department to be able to turn that around. And all you can do is maybe cajole and persuade. Is that all we're going to have here, or what way can we turn that around? Because there's good practice should be shared and be able to address these issues.
So I guess that Brett outlined that it will not be at a departmental level, it will be at a executive level. So it is the investment strategy for Northern Ireland at the executive level. So there has been consultation with each department in terms of their requirements, which is in this consultation document. But overall it threads the big 5 themes in digital transformation, green growth, social inclusion as part of that. So it is a mandate that is entirely delivered across the department, so you're not actually doing pieces and programmes within that. The next board at the official level will have a governance framework as part of that, twice yearly as a minimum. And the executive office will also have a mandate as part of that to approve that. So you'll have the governance framework at 2 areas within that. There is also a portfolio management process which actually allows transparency of these are the programmes and this is where the status is in each of those, which can be provided to officials or to ministers, and a single source of...
But I think the point is, you talk about mandate, I think the point that Mr. Muir is trying to drive at here, if I'm right,
yes,
is do you have the teeth to actually, if all of the things that you're setting out there and in the programme come together to fruition and are delivered fine. If they don't, what can you do about it?
Well,
which is why we recommended that you have follow the not you, because it predates you, the head of the civil service should have the same authority and teeth as the head of the Scottish Civil Service, and that hasn't happened.
Yes, and we do have a 2-stage process here, which is the next board and then the executive office, of course, which is, it is an executive proposal, so it was signed off for consultation at the executive office.
You're bringing that authority, that it was signed off by the executive.
But it also will go to the executive as well. So, I don't know, Brett, if you want to come in with any more flavour regarding that?
Yeah, what this governance arrangement puts in place, as I said earlier, is the ability for decisions to be taken in a timely fashion. With regard to individual programmes and projects, the intention obviously is to ensure that they don't go off, that they don't overrun and they don't get delayed. And steps have been taken, which we've briefed you on previously, about the 3 strands of work which are going forward to prevent that happening, improving the capacity and capability of the NICS in terms of project management and the quality of senior responsible officers, improving the business case process, making sure that decisions on whether to proceed or not with projects are better informed and are on the basis of more accurate estimates. And then thirdly, the work that's going forward on identifying the root causes of delays and overruns, and identifying the ways in which those root causes can be addressed. And those strands of work are designed to reduce the likelihood of the sorts of problems that you and the NIO have identified in the past. But they have to be seen in the context of the overall governance structure, so that when problems do arise, that there are people in place with the right authority to take decisions to address those problems and to get things back on the right track. And as Dr. Brady has said, at the moment within the current constitutional dispensation, that power resides with the executive, and that the important thing is to make sure that the executive is in a position to take those better informed decisions in a timely fashion.
Yeah, but sorry, with all due respect, Mr. Hannam, it is exactly the point you've just finished making, which is the point we raised before. Because if the executive isn't there and isn't functioning, then we have a situation that happened whenever we had 3-year suspension.
I'll give you a practical example, which is the A5, okay? So myself and my party would support that project. The way that's constructed and way it's been pursued by the department, I think that the chances of being able to get approval and getting delivery of that is less than if they took a different way forward, which was to break it down into certain different sections, because by the time you get all the environmental statements and everything else completed, they're at a date and there's a judicial review, and the judicial review is successful, and I don't think that's a good way to go, okay? But currently in the situation we're going to have at the moment, that's just going to continue, and that's just going to continue, and the A5 is not going to be delivered, and I'm making it clear, support the A5 delivery, particularly for the amount of people who have been killed and seriously injured on that. But there needs to be a forum to be able to call that out, also in relation to other projects like casement. You know, how long have we been waiting for that to be delivered? There's been no mechanism for that to be flagged up within the executive or with other ministers to say, you need to take action, you need to address this in relation to that. So that's my worry about this, because the result is that in relation to the A5, there's money put aside within capital budgets that isn't spent. So at the end of the financial year, it's unspent. You're trying to find ways to ensure that it is spent or if it's carried forward. And what do? We repeat, we do this all the time in relation to major capital. York Street interchange, I know something close to your own heart in terms of your own constituency. You know, that situation, that was a procurement challenge that occurred, but there was no way to be able to flag that up and to see whereabouts those problems were occurring and to intervene to ensure delivery. And that's where, if you compare Northern Ireland to other parts of the UK and Ireland in terms of delivery of major capital projects, we don't fare very, very well in relation to that, because projects are either delayed, they're over time, or they don't occur. Now, put that in a positive context, because you've been very positive. There's other projects that we've been able to deliver here in Northern Ireland, and deliver it on time and deliver it well, such as the rapid transit system and stuff like that, which was delivered. So there is a context and there's learnings to be got from that. But I'm just to worry that a lot of these are not forums for intervention, that you have a lot of soft power and you're using it really, really well, but there's no way to be able to intervene to stop this repeat of these projects going awry. Sorry to labour this, but I just think it's important.
No, and actually, you know, it's really useful to get the scrutiny and the challenge, to be honest.
But it isn't. I want you to don't want you to leave this meeting. We're criticising you.
No,
this is something. This is something we. When we carried out the investigation and the inquiry into the capacity and capability of the civil service, we identified at that point, and therefore, when we produced our report prior to your appointment, we flagged this up as an issue. It was ignored and it wasn't taken on board, and we are potentially in that position again.
So I guess to take your point, really helpful, and this is all in a very positive constraint. We've talked about, I guess, providing the right skills and accurate planning, go through those areas, but we still, you know, we have a work in progress in terms of how we do this. This is for consultation, and this is actually part of that consultation framework, you know. But to your point, you know, I don't think I would, as a head of civil service, be modelling a scenario where I'm planning for 3 years without an executive. I think that is not my role. I do not want to be a politician. It is too hard, and I have not the skills to do it, if I'm very honest. So what I am doing is to make sure that we learn from the issues we have, and I'm not here to apologise I'm here to listen. And actually, I've listened to the previous sessions that you had from the PAC, which is really helpful. But actually, to put the big levers we can in to address this, and this is fundamentally, this is going to be about the next 10 years. So there's the things historically, what can we learn from, but actually how do we need to build this going forward with the right governance frameworks within the environment that we have within the constitutional levers. You know, so if the constitution is changed, and there can be models where that's different, that's a different environment, that won't be for me as a policy advisor, not a policy maker, to do. But I am very committed to be really clear in this, because I think this is such an opportunity for actually the threads of delivering that. I know, and we're also looking at the Infrastructure Commission as well. That was to you, and the options that we can to support us in that endeavour. But this will be the big funding levers that we can bring in, you know, from all different areas to actually allow us to deliver something very different and going forward. So I take on board your points, and that will be built into our conversation.
Yes, and I've re-emphasised this is not personal criticism. I think it's just important about when we do the major capital projects report. To me, was quite an important report, and it's about actually trying to make sure that we implement the recommendations coming out of that. So.
Mr. Bourne, you want to make a very short and brief
just a very short point, Chair, because it's important that you're asked the question, but I'm going to put it to Brad. Brad, what weight then do you put to the three strands on the no delay or not delay, you said? What weight?
Well, Jill will be able to talk to you about the capability and capacity in terms of project management and SROs, but I have seen a lot of work go into that. Business case process is absolutely vital. If we are proceeding on the basis of inaccurate business cases, then it doesn't matter how well the project team performs, the projects, if they've been undercosted and the estimates for delivery schedules are over-optimistic, then they will be seen as failures. So that's critical, and that falls to the Department of Finance. But in terms of identifying ways of addressing the causes of delays and overruns, it's really important that we get a more granular analysis than was possible under the NIEO report, and that's work that SIB is taking forward, trying to quantify the impact of these different root causes and move away from a sort of anecdotal analysis and be much more data-driven in our investigations. Because unless we can do that, we won't be able to identify the processes and the processes where the improvement will have the biggest impact. I can give you an example of that. If you talk to builders or anyone involved in the construction industry, they'll tell you that planning, in inverted commas, is a big problem. But that doesn't really take us very far forward in terms of what can be done to improve planning, or indeed determine whether planning is a particular problem, because it could be the poor quality of the applications, it could be inadequate resources being given in the department to dealing with planning applications, the processes themselves could be overcomplicated, as could the legislation. There may be slow responses from statutory consultees which are contributing to the delays, or there may be inadequate public engagement which leads to objections, which leads to over long developed timescales. So all of those are potentially causes of planning problems, but we don't know what the quantifiable impact of those are, either on individual projects or in aggregate. So the research and the work that we're initiating now is to look at those factors, to look at those root causes and determine which are the most important and which are the ones where reform or transformation will have the biggest impact, as a way of dealing with those problems which your report and that of the NIO reported on.
Okay.
Thank you.
Meg.
Dr. Brady, can I welcome the start that you've made in terms of innovation and change, but
Here we go.
I appreciate there's a
But-
way to go.
But-
There's a way to go. And I wish you best wishes as you go along. You said that there's 2 external appointees to the Northern Ireland Civil Service Board. You've had considerable corporate international experience. How often would there be such a proportion of, if you like, external directors and executive directors on board in a governance arrangement? Have we got the balance right, or do we need more than just 2 with a range of expertise to challenge the permanent secretaries who are there, who have been a bit of a club running things for themselves to date?
Well, I guess I'm not part of that club. I've come in you. And they have embraced me, and I've gone joined many organisations coming in you, and I thought coming into civil service it would be, a case in its own right. But actually, what I found really refreshing is that I really enjoyed working with politicians, and I also really enjoyed working with public servants, because actually at the end of it, all the people I work with and for are out for doing public good. So no one is really, so there's very little small p politics. There is maybe a lot of p. So I've really enjoyed working with that team across the board. The ratio of 2 is quite typical. In fact, you can get overwhelm a board, in my experience, if it is too heavily weighted. But that's not to say once we actually get into a system that we cannot flex that and change that augmentation. But I'm really keen that it's looking towards a board representative who maybe aren't the same as a departmental board. So this is a very strategic and specialised piece as well, and we build in that core expertise as well. So I think 2 for me feels about the right ratio. I think there's optically moving at the moment. The board meets once a month, but this you could say it's a bit of checking in and talking about what things happened. This has to be about what stuff we're doing for the next 3 months. What stuff did we do the last 3 months? What's our programme for the year? What are our big corporate agenda items that we're actually struggling with? It has to be, for me, that would be the biggest change, never mind the external reference. It's actually what is our package of work, so that we have a planned package of work that we're delivering, and it isn't just a issue raising session or a kind of sharing of kind of references. So that and undoubtedly the investment strategy will be a key theme in terms of that strategy. Undoubtedly the work that Jill will be delivering in terms of the strategic organisation development will be a big delivery focus as part of that. And we will be mobilising not just the perm sex but also the senior civil service to deliver in some of those strands. So there will be delivery focuses and programmes that come out of the actual work packages that we have as well. So I guess in essence, I've seen, two is probably the right model, but I'm not constrained by that in terms of if we need more, we can bring in certainly extra expertise.
You've spoken of the investment strategy to address some of the failures that we have seen in terms of particularly large capital projects. But it was only later on that you then mentioned the Infrastructure Commission. The investor strategy will manage the large projects, but ensuring that the right projects are selected in the first place. Their economic impact, the environmental impact, and the climate change bill, which probably, hopefully, is going to be finally across the line tomorrow. Those are all major factors. So my question is, how does all of this work in with an infrastructure commission that hasn't even been established yet, so we get the right projects?
And actually I was previously give evidence to the Infrastructure Commission on the other side of MAPI. And of course we have done some work in TO which has been identified in terms of the options analysis. Again, that is a matter for executive decisions and where the Infrastructure Commission is, and in terms of its reference, its mandate in that. But of course we need, whether that's an Infrastructure Commission or another organisation or a non-exec directors, we need to have the expertise, the right skills to make us inform those significant decisions. So looking at, within the next board, we need to understand actually what expertise can we bring into that to actually support us with the corporate programme of work that we have as well. The decision on the way forward for the Infrastructure Commission will be a decision for the new executive, and we have worked within TEO to provide some options analysis with other departments as part of that. I think in that it's like this session, I think there's frameworks of how we do that. Scrutiny and challenge is always good before you go into anything. So the maximum kind of insights and scrutiny and intelligence we can get around these decisions is what we should be focusing for as well. So that certainly will be something that I'll be very, very clear about as well.
Okay. The Minister of Finance, in response to the recent Take Note debate, referred to a review which is currently underway in the operational model for people management in the civil service, and that he was working with the Executive Office, the head of the civil service, yourself and the Civil Service Board, to prioritise interventions that will make a real difference. Can you provide any more detail about this?
Yes, and I think we have an MOU between the Executive Office, between First Minister, Deputy First Minister when they were in post, and the Finance Minister, and also we're working very closely, obviously at a departmental level, and we talked about that separation of those two roles that we had identified earlier within the HR facility in terms of the supply side and then the organisation development. So the programme of work that we're actually looking to identify that people strands by the next board are those key areas that we are addressing, which I think will be referenced by the Finance Minister, and that's looking at that senior civil service development, that looking at how we manage performance management and actually overall that corporate programme that are built into performance management aspects, how we provide leadership development also as part of that progression of the SCS group, and then also building into that, looking at the cultural kind of aspects and insights that we've had in how we progress forward in that. And of course, all the areas regarding broader diversity and inclusion, skill pathways, technology backgrounds and special professional skills. So Jill, do you want to?
Yeah, and just in addition to that then the whole sort of talent management piece we talked about earlier, but also a really important piece of work is a whole project around developing the new workforce model. So making sure that the civil service workforce model is actually fit for purpose. And looking at all of the work that has gone on in GB, civil service and other areas, particularly looking around the skills, the career pathways, job families. One of the first things that came out of the RHI report, and obviously a theme in your report as well, was the matching of jobs to people rather than generic civil service type jobs. So that would be in that area as well.
There will be high-level interventions that can make a difference, but there's also lower departmental level interventions that can make a difference. And the last time you were here, I raised the issue of special educational needs. One of our recommendations on our report, which was February 2021, was there should be reviewed flexibility of how special educational needs funding is given and allocated and its outputs. And at that stage I referred to up to 3 classroom assistants standing at the back of the classroom in post-primary schools not doing anything. Since then we actually, in the evidence for our TSN report, a headmistress that told us that there can be not 3 but 4 and 5 classroom assistants standing at the back of the classrooms. And we're also given evidence from the boys' model school that they have somehow managed to gain the flexibility and are having much better outcomes by employing one-to-one teachers, small work groups, and some classroom assistants by having the flexibility in that funding. So how are you going to empower civil servants to make a difference on the ground and do it on a timely basis? Because this is a year ago since we first highlighted this issue, and I haven't heard any sign of change other than we'll consider a pilot.
So you'll obviously I can't speak for the Department for Education.
I'm just pointing out, Mr. Beggs, with all due respect, you will have the permanent secretary in the Education Authority onto the committee in a few weeks' time, so questions you would put to them really.
Okay.
I think I'm not sure it's entirely fair to put that question to the head of the civil service. You know, if you want to answer it, you can, but I do think it's probably best to put to the appropriate.
I'm not trying to dodge the issue, but my response is, I mean, I don't set the policy for department. I need to be really clear about what I can do and what I can't do on that.
I just thought it was a good opportunity to flag up with the sort of things that are not happening and that should be happening. Finally then, can you comment on how your role as the head of the civil service you will engage with the Department of Finance? Because there's this strange situation that the Department of Finance includes the Northern Ireland Civil Service HR function, but you're the head, but they have the responsibility. So has an HR and leadership memorandum of understanding been developed between you and the Department of Finance?
Yes, we have, and that has all been signed off by the First Minister, Deputy First Minister, and also the Finance Minister. And indeed, what we have rolled out since then is the restructuring of those roles with a dotted line reporting to me via Jill she's in the Department of Finance, but reporting into me, leading that change agenda on the next HR organisation development. And I guess what we have, I can say lots of things about what I'm going to do, but what have we done? In the last 3 months, there's quite a lot of things actually we have delivered in the midst of, and I'm sure you get many excuses, but Omicron and war and all the rest of things. So we have moved forward some of those really, the graduate programmes, the placement programmes. We have brought in very extensive PermSec recruitment process and appointed apprenticeships, forward diversity schemes and programmes as part of that. So not just we have a document which says we will work closely together, but actually we have worked closely together and we have delivered aspects as part of that as well. And it's been, we need to go more and further and faster and all those things. But yes, that there is both formal engagement and then there is dotted line kind of structures, and then there is just ways of working together, which is working very well together.
And a final comment, just in terms of what Andrew said about the A5, I would urge you to look at what the Interim Commissioner's Executive Summary Report said about it, which was also recommending prioritising section to make sure something can happen and make improvements on the ground rather than continually face barriers to any development whatsoever.
Thank you.
Can I just ask, Dr. Brady, in terms of when you came into the role, you said you hoped to address the issue of the culture of silo management that was existing in the civil service, and I'm pleased you've been embraced by your colleagues. And can I therefore ask you, how are you getting on in dealing with that issue?
Silo. So I gave an example of I guess us where there are many areas where we don't there are areas where working in silos good. So I guess to be clear on that, so sometimes you don't want everyone over all the areas if you have defined responsibility, because if you enforce that overall, then you just get not the right people doing the right thing. And I'm very much of pushing down and deferring the people who are accountable at the lowest level to make those decisions. But there has been examples of where we have delivered. The pandemic has been a non-silo level operation. You know, it's been difficult, really difficult, complex decisions that we have delivered as part of that, and I chaired that COVID task force, and I talked about corporately our civil servants stepping up in terms of providing offices and surge capability. In the executive office itself, as a remit, there are many areas by the nature of it that we get which are cross-departmental, which are non-siloed. So the investment strategy itself is a joint document which has been engaged with every single PermSec, signed off by the minister of each of the departments, and actually has been agreed to go into consultation. So that is a living document of aspects that are brought together cross-departmentally. To do that, we need actually structures in place. So the structure for us to do that is the next board, and a reconstituted next board, which actually builds in not just projects that we do together, but actually builds in a corporate agenda for programmes that we will collectively need to deliver. And I guess to say, you know, we should only be doing that in the areas that we do need to do that, but actually the strategies that we have going forward, green growth strategy, is entirely cross-departmental in its essence. So we cannot deliver any aspect of those strategies without looking towards a kind of a cross-departmental whole of government working. We have delivered the first year of the COVID recovery plan, which did deliver multiple programmes and projects across various departments as well as part of that. So we have templates to go for. I'm sure it will continue to be a challenge, as it is in any organisation. And there isn't any organisation which doesn't have issues with cross-departmental working and how that's effective. So we need to be mindful of that. But actually, the problems that we need to solve in the next 10 years will require us to address and work together in terms of doing that. The vehicle will be through the next board and through a shared corporate agenda to deliver that.
Yeah.
If you don't mind me just also adding, it was one of the specific recommendations, but from the new financial year we'll have a new permanent secretary and SCS appraisal scheme, and it will specifically have in then corporate objectives, so the objectives that are corporate ones rather than departmental, so you have to actually demonstrate that you have delivered on issues that are cross-cutting and corporate. And Jane has asked that we put in place, and we should have that up and running as well, a new 360-degree appraisal. So that's not just above and below, that's various people. And then also we're delivering for Jane an NICS board development programme and activity. So a lot of the sort of speakers and experts that we're bringing in will very much focus on that ability to deliver on collective and collaborative leadership rather than just individual skill sets. So a lot of it around behaviour and how you deliver, not just what you deliver.
So I welcome that the whole issue of joined up seems to be improving. That has been a weakness, I think, for government. And I was doing a discussion panel at Ashfield Boys School this morning, and this is one of the issues that actually came up. Can I just, therefore, and I made mention to this to the Finance Minister and other ministers in the Chamber recently, you will be aware that Peter Weir, when he was Minister, established a group, the First Start group, under Dr. Pardee, and they brought forward their report. And then we, as a PAC, did the Closing the Gap report, and that was about education attainment in working class areas, particularly working class Protestant areas, and the linkage to you know, the wider society in terms of the impact on those young people. And those two pieces of work are very much run alongside each other. That's just why when we launched it at the Boys Model, Closing the Gap, we invited Dr. Purdy and his team to come along, and they all did. But the key thing for that, and this is something which I will be putting to Mark Brown and Sarah Long as well, but it's wider than education. It is absolutely cutting across government. And if we don't have the buy-in of government in relation to it, it can't be delivered by the Department of Education and the EA on their own. It's such a huge issue. I mean, what can you assure this committee that you, as the head of the civil service, will drive forward that, you know, given that we are permanent secretary and the chief executive bought into those reports, have told us they're committed to them. We've had other permanent secretaries from other departments saying the same thing in front of this committee. So can you assure us that as head of the civil service, that commitment and those resources will be there to ensure going forward, whoever will hold positions and portfolios as ministers, that those issues will be key issues for the Northern Ireland Civil Service and the departments that you have operational management for?
And of course, I don't have responsibility for policy
No,
decisions.
but you have more operational.
But to give you a view of why I took this role is, which I reflect on, is often
Join the club.
having no capability or able to do the politician route. What are the things that actually you can make life better for the people of Northern Ireland, really? That's what everyone here is there to do, and everyone I work with is there to do. And I believe that actually, you know, the next board, we talked about governance, and it was important, really important infrastructure elements, and we talked about skills. But actually what it's about is delivering something better in 10 years to the people of Northern Ireland. And what we are looking at, and I'm discussing with colleagues, is what are the critical few things that actually we can deliver that have a longer term trajectory, that are cross-cut, so that they don't go away after a new mandate. And for me, the three is the early years intervention, which Ms Hunter talked about, and which you have also referred to, because actually those are the pieces that will actually affect all the upstream areas in terms of economy, in terms of justice, in terms of health outcomes. Right. And I'm from the same area as you. Yeah. And the age deprivation, that, you know, 9 years life expectancy difference where I'm born to where I live now, and that's been the same, you know, since I left there 25 years ago. So those are, for me, the things that I think that we need to look and focus on and work with the next board. Our corporate programme is what can it be like in the next 10 years that actually drives that? And the threads, and this talks to those, and our COVID recovery talks to those. The COVID recovery plan talks to the economy, it talks to green growth, it talks to the health outcomes, but it talks to the inequalities aspect. So for me, those three big things are those early years interventions to provide better outcomes, tackling the economy, and that's actually the economic inactivity, because we'll never solve the economy in the economy. We need to move down from 27 to 22, 23% and get 20,000 people in fulfilling roles, because that will also impact in society in terms of health outcomes and justice outcomes, and then the green growth. So that's very much on where I see those three big things are. And I appreciate that it won't, and I think those are common areas of endeavour across all political kind of groups and aspects, and there is a job for officials to do, in my view, in terms of making sure the infrastructure, and I think those are the infrastructure elements which can be delivered cross-cutting after different mandates can deliver. And actually, so those are embedded in this piece, but those are also aspects that we can look towards different funding options which are available, such as the Shared Prosperity Fund, such as Levelling Up. So we have set up a group to engage with that, and the Shared Island Fund, indeed making sure that we're within that, looking at prioritising areas which will make the difference. And I was in a meeting with the housing executive, and you look towards economic activity, but the housing executive are actually they provide the homes for many of those economic activities. So how can we reach out to our arm's length bodies to make sure that those big priorities are delivered down? But it might be they have to be quite focused. We can't say we're doing 83 big cross-departmental cutting things. We need to be really clear about the few things we can go over systemically.
And I endorse and I agree with all that you said, but specifically in terms of First Start, there is a commitment across the civil service to provide that necessary resource and finance to ensure, because early intervention is cheaper and it's more effective. And we've made that point to the Permanent Secretary of Education, we've made that point to the Permanent Secretary in Justice and Health. So, okay. Well, look, thank you very much. No other member has indicated they wish to ask questions. Before I conclude this session, Mr. Donnelly, you and your team want make any comment?
Chair, I have nothing to add.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, well, look, thank you very much indeed, and thank you for being so candid. As members have said, you seem to have made a good start. You won't be coming in front of us anymore, I'm sure you'll be pleased to know, but the successor committee obviously will be, so wish you well, you and your colleagues, as you go forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, members, we will now go into, with your permission, closed session to discuss the evidence session we've just concluded. Agreed?
Agreed.
Great.
This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room